be paying attention to, and that you should know because it's there for you to get that information. I also expect you to complete the work every week, and we'll talk about the kind of the exemption policy associated with that. Communication with me is really important. If you have questions, ask them. You can send me emails. But if you're having problems, I don't know unless you tell me. If there's a struggle and you don't let me know about it, I can't help you. And so you have to share that with me and reach out if there's issues. We also follow the APA 7th edition formatting guidelines for papers, citations, references. I'm a stickler for that. I expect you to do it and to follow those instructions. And so there are resources at Franklin for that. Some of you may have an APA book, or you can go and look at different sites to help you understand how to handle APA. I'll give you guidance when I see issues, but I would say just make sure that you're looking that up and doing it appropriately. For the references, in terms of appropriate references, and I'm sure this isn't the first time that you've heard this, no wikis, dictionaries, blogs, random websites are appropriate in academic work as references. Now, if you're writing a blog, absolutely. But if you're writing an academic paper, no. And so you need to make sure you're using scholarly resources, minimal numbers of newspapers, that's public press and journalism, and questionable facts are often in journalistic articles. So just keep that in mind. You can use what we call gray literature, which are generally the white papers. So for instance, the Society for Human Resource Management, it's the international group or the national organization for professionals in that field. They do research and they publish it. They publish the white papers associated with that. It is not an academic peer-reviewed article. Hence, it's not that top tier of literature, but it is what we consider gray literature, and it is still appropriate to use. So, you know, those professional association white papers you can use. The textbook, although that shouldn't be your only source, nor should every resource or reference you have be a textbook from one of your classes. Yes, you can use that, but you also need to have peer-reviewed scholarly articles in there and a minimal use of newspapers. So when I'm looking at what I expect in terms of the work that you're doing and the papers you're turning in, these are like my baseline expectations for that. Now, there's a few other things. One, I need you to engage with each other in the discussion board, and I will pipe in and ask questions here or there. I would appreciate it if you would respond and answer the questions. But it's also very helpful if you make sure you're answering questions that your peers ask you. That's what develops the discussion. And so, you know, that becomes crucial. The one problem in the discussion boards is that this class goes really fast. There's a discussion every week, and you need to engage in the discussion the week it's going on. If you post late for discussions, I will give you points, or you earn the points for the original post, but it's past the point where you can actually earn points for discussion with others because they've moved on. There is no ability to discuss there. So I expect you to keep up with that every week and read the feedback on your papers. So I do use the rubrics, but here's the thing. I tend to grade more leniently, and what I will do is, you may have some serious issues with the paper, but if it's the first time I've seen those issues, then I do not take off full points for them. Instead, what I do is I give you the feedback that needs to be improved, give you information on where to go to help you to improve it or provide some for you. And then my expectation is in the next assignment, that's going to be fixed. So you could legitimately have 100 on a paper and have some significant issues I expect you to fix. If you don't read the feedback and just go, I got a good grade, I made an A, it was a 90, I'm happy with that, and you ignore the feedback, then that next paper, if those problems still exist, it may be an 80. And so what I need you to make sure you do is, no matter the grade, you look at the feedback. And that will help tremendously in making sure that, the skills are developing, but also those problems aren't continuing to happen. The grading for the course will be complete by Friday. If I can get it done earlier, I will. But by Friday, you should have a grade. If you do not have a grade by Friday, then what that says is there was some problem with me getting that material. Either you posted it after I graded, and so it hasn't been graded because I'm done, or something glitchy is happening with Blue Quill. And so I just need you to reach out if you don't see a grade, to reach out and make sure. The other problem I occasionally have with Blue Quill is that I will put a grade in there and I will publish all grades, and then I'll have one random grade not actually publish. And when I do it, it shows published. And then when you're looking, it's not. When I go back in, it's not published. So that doesn't happen often, but it's happened often enough that if you're not seeing it, let me know. And then I also have both a blog and a YouTube channel where I put information about being a working professional in higher education and being in online classes. So everything on the YouTube channel, for instance, there's a video on how to do a literature review, how to review journal articles, and one on what you need to do for a discussion question, what's expected. And so if you feel like you need some help or guidance, you can get information in both of those places to help. And if you subscribe to the blog, then it just gets delivered to you in email if you want it, which you don't have to do either of those two things. I just let you know because that's where I put a lot of more general information to try to help students versus in specific classroom settings. Do I have any questions from anyone at this point? You can either type it in the chat or unmute and ask, whichever would be easiest.
So
no questions from me.
Okay.
This
None
is
here.
Zan. I do have a question.
Okay.
And I only bring this up because you brought it up as something that you talk about in your blogs or YouTube about how to do discussion board posts.
Uh-huh.
One of the things that I don't have a problem with the discussion board posts. It's, can you put it into perspective of why? Because I feel we're losing so much by not having live discussions instead of just, I consider them really just, I got to write another paper and then I need to respond to somebody else's by writing another paper. So to me, I think we're losing so much by not having live discussions.
Well, there's a couple of kind of components to that in terms of the discussion question online. Where it helps tremendously, especially when you're in graduate school, whether it be master's or doctorate, is that one, it helps strengthen your writing. You're practicing a skill you need, and you need to be able to make academic arguments in the written form, which doesn't happen by having this kind of discussion. Two, it makes sure everybody is a part of the discussion and is exploring and engaging in the topic. One of the things that happens in a live classroom setting, or even a setting like this, if I threw a topic out there that had some depth to it and required some depth of response, not everybody would ever get a chance to talk, or would even unless they were called on. And so that doesn't really allow me to see what everybody's understanding level is. And so that's the other part of this. If we were meeting, 3 hours one night a week, or an hour 3 days, an hour for 3 days a week, then that's a different kind of animal to get people into live discussions and make sure everybody in smaller graduate classes are actually speaking to the topic and showing their understanding and skills surrounding it. But that can't be done in a 50-minute session one time a week, even in a class, when you're talking graduate level work where the expectations in terms of the quality of the discussion is higher. It's not just a, yeah, I understand it, here's a basic couple of sentences on it. It's, no, I want a deeper reflection on how it works, why it works, what theoretical perspectives underline that working. And so that can't be done effectively for everybody in the verbal setting. And so the discussion in that requires you writing, which it does, and it is like writing small mini papers. One forces that exploration of that particular topic. Two, it forces everybody to explore that topic. It also gives you the ability to really see what other people's perspectives are on it. And that's one of the reasons, or several of the reasons why that's done and done that way. The online just is structured a little differently and needs to be versus the traditional. If you were going to a traditional master's program, it'd be night classes, 3 hours a week, a Saturday, 3 Saturdays and some Sundays for 8 hours a day. I mean, the whole scheduling would be completely different, but it would allow for more in-depth verbal discussion where everybody has to weigh in. Does that help explain it?
It does, actually. Thank you, because that's one of the things that I've been missing, is having those real live conversations. And so to me, that put that into perspective of why, because I've been getting a little frustrated with the discussion board posts. I just always feel like I'm getting robbed.
Well, there are two ways. It's kind of like any education, whether you're on campus or in this kind of setting. I teach in live situations too, and I always tell the students, I'll come to prepared to give you the information, whether you choose to learn it or not, and really engage with it, I have no control over. And in the discussion boards, it's really kind of the same way. Absolutely. It can become kind of this rote thing where I've just got to write this and get it in and then go respond to somebody and move on. And you don't need to read everybody's stuff, nor do you need to respond to everybody. I mean, I address that in working with discussion boards, but you can get real value out of them in terms of reading other people's perspectives. And I will also say this about the written format versus the verbal. What I have found over time is that not only do you get students speaking up, if you will, that otherwise would never say a word because they're too uncomfortable speaking to people or a group of people, and they're afraid to be wrong, but in the written format, some of that fear is taken away. But you also have more depth many times because people have more time to think about how all of it is put together versus the verbal. So, the other thing it can help you with is really look at it in terms of how is what I'm writing about in this discussion question going to actually feed into my understanding of the topic in the assignment, and really think about how those connect together so that writing is helping you with that next thing. And that can also help you feel less like it's just this rote activity that you have to do that's not giving you anything on the other side. It can be rote, and there is a certain level of subtraction of the person and personality from it in a way that gives you a little bit of a loss. One other thing you can think about, and I don't know, in the group of students who might be interested, but if you also have a small contingent of students that you recognize from class to class and go through, I mean, it doesn't have to be a professor-led discussion either. If you wanted to have some live discussions surrounding it, that's something that as a smaller group of students you could definitely do, just to get that other perspective, because you absolutely might not be the only one that feels that way or would like that more engaged interaction. So, you could post and then set aside 30 minutes to get together and just kind of discuss what the differences in your posts meant to you or why they were similar instead of different. So that might be a way to get that if you really do want to try to find that. in the situation. I'll give everybody another chance to ask questions here in a second. So if that spurred something for someone else, or we want to revisit that, just let me know here in a second. With COVID-19, okay. So I put this in place the last time I taught this class, which was in the spring semester when everything was really getting bad. But as I'm sure many of you are, I'm still working from home instead of in my campus office. I'm sure many of you are still working from home, which creates its own set of unique struggles with getting work done and separating work and schoolwork. You may or may not have children at home that you're, needing to juggle in all of this. So here's a few things that I'm just going to leave in place. You do not need my approval for late submissions, and I will not take off any points for late work. The only place this wiggle room really doesn't exist is your responses to others in the discussion, because it does need to happen when that discussion is occurring. I will, of course, your original response, you can submit late if you need to. But here's the thing. You need to stay on track if at all possible. I'm putting this in place just so if somebody could get sick, someone in your family, there can be all sorts of things that pop up because of this, in addition to just regular life. But this class is still a very short class, right? It's 6 weeks. It goes fast. There is significant work in it. And if you get too far behind, then what that can really do is make it difficult to finish. And I don't want you to be in that spot if we can help it. So keep in touch with me. Let me know how things are going. The only other place in the work where this can get really problematic is when we start looking at, and in fact, I may switch the screen here for a minute. Let me find this. Okay, I'm moving it over to our classroom for just a moment. When we're looking at the class, when we get to, when we get to week 5, there's the leadership plan feedback. And this really requires that you provide feedback to another student's work. So 2 things get a little problematic here. In week 4, you submit the outline that gets shared with peers. And then in week 5, that peer feedback is supposed to be provided. So what I do is I go in and I pair you up and say, you need to share your work with X. And depending on the total number in the class, I may have, you give your work to this person gives their work to this person, and then it flips around. We may have 3 in a stream. But whatever that looks like, I put you together in those pairings. If you don't turn in your outline, then your peer has a problem because they can't do the feedback for you. And the feedback, them providing feedback is a grade, right? And then if they've submitted theirs and you haven't submitted yours, and I have a couple of people like that and I have to juggle, then when you want to submit yours and it's late, others have already moved on. I mean, it just, as you can tell, it can get more and more complex with that particular issue. So when we hit here, please, if, I understand if you're stricken with illness, something comes up, but we know this is going to be on the schedule in week 4 and week 5. Please go ahead and look ahead and make sure you've got the time built in to get this done so that your peers and you have what you need to do those assignments and earn those grades. And if you haven't looked ahead to assignments, I would say that's one of the suggestions I'm going to make, is that you go through and read through what's due every week, because the class moves so quickly, that you have a real understanding of what you're doing. And you can see right here in week 3, there's the leadership plan overview. So you can read that and get an overview of that assignment that cascades on these other weeks. Now, the other component of this is in week 6, there's a leadership plan presentation where you present your leadership plan. The way I set this up is through a recorded presentation. This makes it much simpler for scheduling on your end and on mine to get them done and get them submitted. If you really want a live presentation, you want to present it live, and I have a group of you that want to do that, then you need to let me know and I'll set up one night to do those, and we'll have that smaller group of students come together to present live. But otherwise, I will put instructions in here for recording them and submitting that recording. And that way you can do a little editing to get it the way that you want to get it before you submit it for grading. And the timeline for submission and presentation does not become such a challenge. So just FYI, that's something I want you to look ahead to and just go ahead and be thinking about. Here's what the welcome to the week message looks like. And so those will publish every week. Please just make sure that you look at it. Okay, any questions about any of that so far? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. All right, so I'm gonna, now in terms of meetings, what I have set up is every Thursday night at 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Standard or Central Standard. I have office hours. What I will do is in the welcome to the week message, in that message, I'm going to turn it on where you can respond to that. And what I need you to do is if you want to come to office hours, you let me know by noon on Thursday that you're planning to attend, because I'm not going to sit on Zoom by myself for an hour on a Thursday night if none of you are planning on coming. But I will absolutely be here for an hour if you want to come and engage. So I just want to know by noon by Thursday if you're planning on coming. That is also a great time to tell me if you go, hey, I want to come tonight to office hours and I would really like you to talk about X. I don't understand this. I would like more an overview of this assignment. I'm looking ahead to next week and this assignment instructions are confusing to me. If you'll give me a heads up about that type of thing, then when we come together on Thursday night, I can address those specific things that you want addressed in that office hour. Otherwise, if I don't get any responses from anyone by noon, then I will not be on Thursday night. So I just need you to, that's what you need to do to make sure that office hours, you can take advantage of office hours. So anybody have any questions about that? Okay, all right. And I will say this, if a little bit later on Thursday, if it's 3 o'clock and you go, oh man, I'm working on this assignment and I'm stuck and I really want to talk, reach out to me, send me an email instead of a response to that announcement, and we'll work something out. Even if we have to start a little later, we'll get that to work. So keep that in mind. Okay. So the one last thing I kind of want to just touch on is what we're going to be covering in the class overall and some of the things we're going to be addressing. Theory, of course, is going to be embedded through all of it, leadership theory. But there's some things just to keep in mind as we start to cover this. One, what you'll see is you're going to be doing some assessments in different places, and the importance of those assessments and really starting to understand yourself and to build a lens through which you can view others and understand both their leadership skill, how they approach leadership, what some of their behavior means or could mean, I'll say. And so those assessments are something that when you take them, you'll get the most out of them if you're taking them from the standpoint of, I'm going to be brutally honest about myself and answering these questions because I really want to know what it has to say. You also have some opportunity throughout the course to schedule, and let me look here and see which week it is again. There's a leadership assessment, and that is week 2, where you're going to do some scoring for yourself. And then you're also, if you look at part 2, so this is in week 2, it's the leadership self and peer assessment. So this is happening next week. It goes fast. If you'll look at part 2, you need to identify a minimum of 2 individuals you work with that are willing to complete the peer assessment of your leadership for you to use. Now, we ran into a few issues last semester in terms of the instrument really directs you to not email the form, but to use hard copy. We made an exception last semester because people weren't working in the same location, weren't going into an office. So being able to hand a hard copy off was almost impossible. If you're in that situation still, then by all means, you have an exemption to email the form. If you are able to hand it off in a hard copy, then follow that instruction. But I want to go ahead and just kind of call that out. But you need to be planning for that now, because you'll use it later. And this just starts to help you kind of look at how these assessments can be useful and provide new perspectives. I think, if you look at the current situation we're in, you really start to clearly see why leaders matter and leadership matters, and what a lack of leadership skill and capability actually can mean. And I'm sure you see this from everything from your individual organizations. You either see great examples of leaders stepping forward and it making a huge difference in how everybody's able to interact and succeed, or you see examples of where leaders have really failed. And that can be for a multitude of reasons, but how that failure has equated to loss of jobs, loss of morale. We could just keep listing there. There can be a lot associated with that. And so, learning how to be a good leader is really important. The nice thing about it is that leadership is a learned behavior. You can learn how to be a good leader. You can identify the areas that you need to develop and develop further in those areas. And even when you do these assessments and go, oh, I'm pretty good at this, or I score high, my question is always, well, how could you be better? Because I don't ever think a leader is fully developed. I think this is an area where you can go to your grave still working on it, some component of it. So part of the trick is to really identify where you need to focus now, because there may be a lot of areas that you're not as strong as you want to be. And the reality is you can't work on all of them effectively all at the same time. You need to be able to think about how certain skill sets within leadership are really necessary for what you're doing now and the situations you're in, and develop those first, and then work on subsequent skills as you're either fully developed in one set, or you see they're necessary for the job you're doing or the one that you want. And the interesting thing about learning leadership skill is, and learning how to behave in a way that really fosters environments you want, is that self-awareness is so crucial. And so many times, I guess you could say it's partly the ego. And this is something everyone suffers from. It's not something where I'm saying it's you or it's this type of person. It's a people issue, right? Ego is a part of it. And this desire to be able to say, I'm great, I don't need any work here. And how often we're wrong when we think that we need further development, and we're blinded or biased in a way that doesn't allow us to see how we're perceived and then take the hard steps to fix that. And so what I hope from this class is we explore different theory, as you look into different assessments, as you start to create a concrete plan for yourself to develop in areas for leadership that will help expand your career, that you really commit to being brutally honest with yourself. In your outline, your peer will read that. And so for peer feedback, they'll provide you feedback. But, when you're brutally honest with yourself about this type of stuff, it can only help you get better. When you wear the blinders, refuse to really self-assess and be self-aware, that means while leadership is a learned behavior and it is learnable, you probably are not ever going to learn it. You may theoretically understand it, but that's different than learning the behaviors and being able to implement them for yourself and for the people who work with you and around you. So that would kind of be my challenge to you, is it will be uncomfortable to do that, but that level of being uncomfortable will last for 6 solid weeks and then it'll end. But if you do that, then at the end of this course, you can walk out with a solid plan to start really working on areas that can make you stronger. And that really is up to you, to how you engage with that and if you want to take that challenge. So that kind of gives you a quick overview of the overall class, my expectations, and what I hope that you get out of it as we near the end. Does anybody have any questions, concerns at this point that you want to talk about?
Not at this time. Thank you for being so detailed in your explanation.
Oh, no problem. And, I'll just reiterate, if you have questions, ask. There are no stupid questions. I may not have immediate answers, but I will find them. But I would rather you ask than struggle. So please reach out and do that if you need the help. I am not going to keep you any longer if you don't have any questions. So I did record the majority of this, and I will post that in case anybody wants to go back to it later. Did I have another question?
Yeah, this is Beth. I do have a question. There are several of us within this class that are part of a Discover cohort. And based on our schedules, I was just wondering if there was any way maybe we could be paired together somehow because of our work schedules already being aligned, and the fact that we have the ability to use Zoom and chat message boards, Jabber.
Yes, so you're thinking for the peer review assignment?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and send me an email, and I'll just go
Okay.
ahead and make a note that you guys are put together. In fact, I can go ahead.
Okay, awesome.
I can go ahead and make those pairs for everybody if you want me to. So if any of the rest of you are used to working with certain people or have that kind of, we're similar schedules and you want to let me know about it now, then I can go ahead and take that into consideration when putting those together.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, reach out if you need me. I'll see you in the discussion board. Let me know if you're going to attend next week's office hours by noon next Thursday, and we'll get cracking in the class.
Thank you. I hope everyone has a great night.
Okay, bye.
Beth,
Thank you.
thank
Thank
so
you.
much. Goodbye.